In this video, we're going to talk about fractions and probability. Now, we've kind of talked about both of these before, but we're going to kind of put it together in this section. So let's look at a table of information about employment of students. This is from a very large class. And let's say we are asked, what is the probability that a student in this class has a part-time job, and give the answer as a fraction. So normally we would take the part-time number, which is 8 students, out of a total of 24. Oops. And we would divide those two in the calculator. But because they're asking for the answer as a fraction, that's our answer. We're done. Now, you might be wondering if we should simplify it, but that's actually part 2. Part 2 says use scaling to simplify the fraction. So we saw the concept of scaling before, where you either divide or multiply top and bottom by a common number. In this case, we're going to divide both top and bottom by the biggest number we can, which actually 8 does go into 24. So I'm going to divide them both by 8. And that's going to give me 1/3. So they kind of make a comment about how when you simplify a fraction, you can divide the top and bottom by the same number. For example, 16/50 equals 8/25 if you're dividing both top and bottom by 2. So what fraction of the class has no job? Okay, so coming up here, no job, that would be 12 out of 24. Let's go ahead and reduce this one this time. So in general, when you're asked to give your answer in fraction form, they typically want you to reduce it. And I want to say in the homework on Mom, it'll say give your answer as a reduced fraction. But let's go ahead and reduce it. So again, we can actually divide 24 by 12. So we'll divide them both by 12, which will be 1/2 or 1/2. Oops, I meant to do that in blue. All right. So what is the combined fraction of the class that has some kind of job? So some kind of job would qualify as either part-time or full-time. So in this case, if I took the part-time and the full-time, that would be 8 students plus another 4 students, or 12 students total. So 8 plus 4 equals 12 out of 24, which we can reduce just like above, just like we did in the previous ones, actually the same number, and we'll get 1/2. So half the class has a job, half the class does not. So notice that when adding fractions, the numerators are combined, but the denominator stays the same. So in other words, I could have thought of this rather than do 8 plus 4/12 and then put it over 24. I could have thought of them both individually over 24 themselves, as 8/24 students have a part-time job, 4/24 students have a full-time job. Adding those together gives me 12 out of 24. So you might remember when you're adding fractions, the denominator stays the same. In a different class, 3 out of 20 students rode the bus to class and 2 out of 20 rode a bicycle. The rest of the students drove cars. What fraction of the class did not use a car to get to class? Well, since everybody else drove a car, that would be these students that they listed here. So the 3 out of 20 plus the 2 out of 20. So 3 who rode the bus and the 2 who rode the bike. And when we add those together, it's going to be 3 plus 2, which is 5. Denominator stays the same. And now I can reduce this answer. 5 does happen to go into 20. So that's going to be 1 out of 4, or 1/4 of the class does not use a car to get there. Let's say 1 out of 4 of your classmates have a full-time job. Then you find out that 1 in 2 of your classmates has a part-time job. Is this possible? And explain or draw a picture. So 1 out of 4 is another way of saying 1/4. So let's see, if we were to draw a picture of 1/4, I'll use a circle just because it's easy to squeeze into this little space. So 1/4 would be that much. Those would be the people with a full-time job. All right. Then you find out that 1 in 2 has a part-time job. Well, that's another way of saying a fraction. In this time, they're saying 1/2. So 1/4 is full-time and 1/2 is part-time. And yes, visually, I can fit half of the class to be part-time. This would be the part-time group right there. So yes, it does make sense. It is possible. All right. In the information, if the information in question 6 is true, what fraction of the class has a job in general? And show your reasoning. Okay, well, there's a couple ways to approach it. Basically, they are asking us to add the 1/4 and the 1/2. So we are going to add those two. But because I have a picture, I'm going to make my life a little bit easier. And I'm going to notice that if I take this half and I cut it in half, that half of the circle actually is 2 1/4. Or in other words, I could think of the 1/2 as 2/4 plus the 1/4. That's going to give us 3/4. Visually, I could see that in the picture, that it's 3/4 of the circle. And then, of course, I use the picture to justify that 1/2 is the same thing as 2/4. But another thing I could have done was use scaling, and I could have multiplied this fraction here by 2 on top and bottom so that it has the same denominator as the other fraction. And all three of those ways get us to the right answer. On the first page of this activity, we saw that 8 out of 24 students had a part-time job. We surveyed those students and find out that only half of them like their job. So what fraction of students like their part-time job? So if it's 8 out of 24, so 8 people have a part-time job and only half of them like their job, the answer is 4 out of 24. Which we can reduce by 4 on top and bottom. And that gives us 1/6. Okay, now that makes sense. I basically took 8 and I cut it in half. I took 8, divided it by 2, and that's where I got that 4 from. Because there was 8 students out of 24 who had a part-time job. So I took half of the 8 students. All right, great. But there is another way to do this, and it's using multiplication. And they demonstrate that. Oops, I'm sorry. Hold on, guys. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, there we go. Let's continue. So what they really were hoping that we get is that we could have done this as a fraction multiplication. What I could have done was taken 8 out of 24. Let me do it in green here. And halved it. And to half it would be to multiply by 1/2. So multiplying this by 1/2, I would end up multiplying straight across, which would give me 8 over 48, which I can reduce. I can divide 48 by 8 and get 1/6, the same answer. So I could have done this as a fraction multiplication as well, which they demonstrate how to do fraction multiplication down here. When we multiply the numerators and then multiply the denominators, and then we can do some reducing. In a survey, 75% of your class say they love math. Then you find out that only 2/3 of the class was telling the truth. Sorry, that's funny. Write 75% as a fraction and multiply the fractions, then simplify the answer. What fraction of the class truly loves math? Okay, so first thing they ask us to do is to write 75% as a fraction. There's a couple ways to approach this. I could change this into a decimal, which means I would move the decimal place 2 places, and that would be 0.75. And since 75, that's in the hundredths place, I could write 75 over 100. And then I can simplify by dividing top and bottom by 25, or 5 twice. 75 divided by 25 is 3. 100 divided by 25 is 4, so 3/4. Cool. But some of us know that 75% is 3/4, and you could have just jumped to writing 75% equals 3/4. If you didn't, though, this would be the process of writing it as a fraction. Okay, so then they say take the 75% and write it as a fraction and then multiply it by the 2/3 that actually only really like math. So we're going to take 3/4 and times it by, oops, sad looking for, times it by 2/3. All right, so we're going to multiply straight across. So that's going to be 3 times 2, which is 6, 4 times 3, which is 12. And then we can reduce that number, divide top and bottom by 6, which is going to come out to 1/2. So that's the fraction of the class that truly loves math, half of the class.